Hi, everybody. Welcome. Day one, session one of Inforce. Happy to be here. My name is Barry Conway, and I'm a senior solutions architect joining you all the way from Melbourne, Australia.
I'm Kristen Hott, senior security engineering manager based in Austin, Texas. Super happy to have y'all here today. Thanks for waking up bright and early Monday morning. Ready to dive into it.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. Meet Joe. Joe's a security engineer, part of an organization's core security team. He's just had an application engineer come to him and said, "Hey, Joe, we're building a new app, a new feature. It's going to be released tomorrow night, and it's going to be the best feature we've ever released. We now need a security review. We've built everything according to our SDLC. We've completed all the stages. Now we need a security review. Can you help us out?" Joe's had a quick look at this, and he can see initially there's no threat modeling. There's some security standards haven't really been adhered to. So now Joe is a little bit stressed, a little bit frustrated, a little bit annoyed, and is a little bit worried about the risk posture of this new cool feature that's going to be released tomorrow night. This sound familiar here to anybody? So a little bit of what we're going to cover in the session. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we got here. We're going to hear from Sportsbet and their story around their Security Guardians program. And then we're going to have a little chat amongst ourselves and gain some from the field insights from AWS and Sportsbet. So AWS and Sportsbet, they are two very different companies, very different in sizes, very different in the number of people they employ, the operating model, even down to the services that they provide to their customers. Very different in size. And this is just calling out that you don't need to be an AWS-sized company to implement your own Security Guardians program. It can be done of an organization of any size. What AWS and Sportsbet do have in common was they both wanted to scale security across their application teams to help those teams make better security decisions closer to those application teams. They both did this through the use of a Security Guardians program. So back in 2023, Sportsbet read an AWS blog on Security Guardians. And they reached out to me, part of the account team, and other members of the account team, and said, "Hey, can you help us understand what this Security Guardians program is and how we can get started?" That kicked off a series of workshops, sessions, discussions throughout the course of 2023, rest of 23, and the rest of 2024. And in the middle of 2024, that's where we introduced Kirsten, who headed up our AWS Security Guardians program, to Sportsbet to continue those discussions and gain some deeper insights.
So before we dive into Sportsbet's journey, we just give you a quick overview of what it looks like at AWS. So similar to Joe, the security engineer, frustrated security engineer that you were talking about, we had a few Joes at AWS who had to review new APIs, software before we launch it to our customers, and we're becoming increasingly frustrated when the software engineers couldn't answer some of the basic security questions that they were asking them or hadn't thought through all of the security considerations as part of their development. And on the other end, the software engineers were becoming increasingly frustrated because these security engineers were taking too darn long to review their stuff and make sure that they're ready to launch. So that's kind of the genesis of the Guardians program at AWS. And the way that it works is we develop software engineers to understand and get experience with security and how to make the right security decisions, how to use security tools, how to build threat models across the software that they're building. And we do that on each two-pizza engineering team, which is essentially a collection of 8 engineers who are all working on the same product. So our objective is to have at least one of these these experienced engineers gain knowledge of security and to help their team throughout the development lifecycle. That way, once it comes through AppSec, before launch, they've had somebody embedded in that team helping them think through and do all of the security-related stuff so that it's much easier for them to get that sign-off from AppSec that Joe was unable to give that engineer. So as a result, we've seen, we now have over 5,000 Guardians across the company, almost 6,000 actually as of last night. And we've seen a reduction about around 20 days in the amount of time it takes for a software team to get through their security review. We've also seen a decrease in the number of findings and thus the cost of security to the software team because they're having to do less rework in order to get their service security ready for launch. So with that said, we're not here to hear about AWS's program, we're here to hear about Sportsbet's program. And I'm super excited about this because I had the chance to talk with them about a year ago now, a little over a year ago. And it's been really exciting to hear about kind of the evolution of their program and some of the things that they've learned. And hopefully you can take some of that back into your role at your own company. So
thank you.
Come on up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kristen. Okay. Hi, everyone, or g'day, everyone, I should say. I'm Gene Penman from Sportsbet, security team. It's great to see you all. Good turnout. So Barry's story resonates with us at Sportsbet. Barry's story about Joe really resonates with us, I should say. So we had too many occasions where projects would come to us 5 minutes before go live, asking for a security approval with little to no consideration of our security requirements. No threat modeling done, et cetera, et cetera. I saw a few hands go up earlier in how familiar that might sound amongst you. So it's really frustrating for us in security, but it's also frustrating for the business. Nobody wins in these situations. So when we saw how AWS was solving for this, we paid attention. And it wasn't because it was a proprietary framework. There's many different ways you could replicate a model like this, but rather AWS has stood out. It's because they worked with us, they understood our technology stack, how we deliver, but most importantly, they encourage us to start really small. So if AWS at their size and scale, I didn't realize you had 6,000 champions, that's amazing, Guardians I should say, but if AWS at their size and scale could start with just a handful of champions and a really limited scope, why couldn't we? So it gave us the confidence to act. And here's what we were solving for. So even with a really strong engineering culture at Sportsbet, we still had too many late security moments, too many of those Joe frustration security moments. So we needed secure thinking to be bolted in earlier in our development lifecycle across all the teams without slowing them down. So that's what led us to shape our own version of the Security Guardians program. And of course, being a sports-obsessed company, we went with the word champion. So we've got a Security Champions program. So as Barry mentioned earlier, Sportsbet and AWS are two very different companies, but we do have similar problems. So to give you a bit of quick context about Sportsbet, we are Australia's largest betting platform with around 42% market share. We're part of the Flutter Entertainment Group, which includes brands locally in the US, FanDuel, and overseas in the UK, Paddy Power Betfair, amongst many, many others. So we operate at serious scale. So we have to protect the integrity of close to 4 billion price updates every year across 24 million active markets. And we're supporting over 2.5 million active customers. So we're a heavy user of AWS with a technology workforce of around 500 people spread across Melbourne, Australia, where we're from, and Cluj in Romania. So interesting with the time zones. But just as important as our product and platform scale is our responsibility to protect our customers. So we're known for our industry-leading safer gambling focus using data and machine learning to proactively reduce harm. So when you operate at this pace and scale, you need security to be embedded in the same way, distributed, proactive, and part of our culture. So to truly understand the environment we're operating in, you need to look at Melbourne Cup Day. It's our biggest day of the year, and it's known in Australia as the race that stops the nation. And when I say it stops the nation, it literally does, as we get a public holiday for it. So on Cup Day, our platform has to scale dramatically. We go from around 4,000 bets per minute on an average weekday to over 65,000 on Cup Day itself. So we handle 12 million total bets, 1.6 million deposits, and we pay out over $100 million to our customers. So to put that in some perspective, that's a transaction volume that's roughly approaching the levels Amazon does on Black Friday. It all has to work flawlessly, securely, and in real time. So it's a huge moment for the business, but it's also a massive moment for us in security and technology, because if security misses something, we're not just delaying a new feature or a new product, we're actually impacting potentially a real-time financial system under extreme stress. So it further highlights the need to build in security earlier in our life cycle. So whilst Melbourne Cup is the dramatic peak, the reality is we run fast every day. Our delivery model is fast, it's highly autonomous, it's distributed, it's exactly what we want. But that also teaches us how security might fall through the cracks. So with over 25 delivery teams working across multiple time zones in Melbourne and Cluj, as I mentioned, delivering thousands of features, our central cyber team simply can't scale to be involved in absolutely everything. The teams are running hundreds of concurrent initiatives, and at that speed, security questions often surface late. So in our cloud-native environment with CI/CD, threat modeling was happening, but all too often rushed or missed entirely. And with high team autonomy, security behaviours varied wildly. Some were great in some teams, some needed some uplift, shall we say. So we didn't see this as a problem so much as a chance to evolve. And that led us to one key behaviour that we want to scale more across our teams. We wanted more people across more of our teams to ask this question, or these questions more often. What are we building? What could go wrong? And what are we doing about it? So that's threat modeling at its essence. But more importantly, it's just good, secure thinking. It's the kind of thinking that happens early and often, in design, and not in a review meeting 5 minutes before they want to go live. And the thing is, we already had people that were doing this, naturally asking themselves this question out in the business, but it just wasn't happening enough. And we asked ourselves, how can we scale this thinking? How do we embed this thinking more in how we deliver? So the good news was, we didn't have to start from scratch. So across our delivery teams, we had what we call our friends of security. And you know these people. These are BAs, these are engineers, they're senior developers, people who just get it, right? They raise security questions early, they coach others in their teams on the right approach, the right way to do things. They take pride in the stack of their platform health of their stack. And they engage with us proactively. Right? Even before they need to formally engage us, they'll be speaking to us. So these people, these friends of security, were doing more of what we wanted, which was asking themselves those three key questions. What are we building? What could go wrong? And what are we doing about it? But here's the thing. They were doing it off the side of their desk. They weren't formally recognised or supported. And there just wasn't enough of them, to be honest. So we leaned into how can we scale this? What if we could turn these organic behaviours into a structured, supported, distributed model that embeds security in every team? So as we step back to think strategically about how to scale this, we thought about our maturity curve. What would it look like if security thinking was part of how we deliver and not something we bolted on at the end? So we started, like many do, with a centralized and reactive security model. Security was handled by the cyber team, doing the reviews, raising the concerns, chasing the fixes, pulling our hair out, lots of Joe moments. We made it work, but it just didn't scale, and we knew we couldn't stay here. And this is our target state we had in mind. So fully scalable, self-sustaining model where secure thinking is owned by the delivery teams and not cybersecurity so much. This was our destination. What gave us hope was that we already saw signs of progress. In many teams, we had our friends of security, engineers naturally thinking ahead, asking themselves those key questions. So we ticked this box, but we also saw it had its limits. It was inconsistent, and it was fragile. So this is where we found ourselves. We were aware, but we weren't yet structured. There was a gap between those isolated good behaviours from our friends in security and the kind of embedded team-wide maturity that we were aiming for. And it was a gap that we couldn't cross with just bolting on more process. And these two phases represent where we were hoping to jump to. It's a reality where secure thinking is truly normal and embedded in our teams, and not the exception. So this is where our Security Champions program came in. We didn't build it to roll out security. We built it to bridge that gap between informal ownership and true distributed capability. So Champions became our scaling mechanism. Not a top-down mandate, but a way to support those staff that were already doing the right thing, already influencing secure delivery from within. Get ready for a great animation there. So it plugs the gap and allows us to traverse that path, which we're currently walking. So we knew from day one that this wouldn't be perfect, and that was okay. We embraced a principle from Japanese design philosophy called wabi-sabi, which finds beauty in things that are imperfect and evolving. So our goal wasn't to launch a fully polished program, it was just to get moving, listen, and improve as we went. So we focused on simple goals first, like raising awareness, supporting design thinking such as threat modeling, surfacing early feedback, and building a community. And what really helped with this approach was the advice from AWS again. Like they showed us how their own program started with just a handful of champions and a narrow scope. And threat modeling was one of their key use cases also. So they helped us see that we didn't need that fully polished curriculum or massive full organizational buy-in from day one. Just start. Just do something. It's better than nothing. Just focus on something. Focus on something real and build it from there. So then we reflected and iterated, quickly throwing out what wasn't working and doubling down on what did work. Importantly, we anchored the program to our technology strategy. We already had clear pillars in our technology strategy around engineering excellence, around asynchronous ways of working to work better with our colleagues in Cluj. And as a result of that, we had strong support from senior leaders early on. And then we let security emerge from within, harnessing the power of the champions we already had, the informal allies, those friends of security, instead of starting from scratch. So while we started it as something small and imperfect, it was framed as an enabler of that broader vision. It made it an easier sell to leaders and helped us position it as something both grassroots and strategic. And that foundation gave us the confidence to move forward, which brings us to the roadmap. So even though we embraced a mindset of wabi-sabi, starting small, embracing imperfection, we still had to have a plan. You always have to have a plan. It was never going to be a one-off initiative. We knew that. So from the beginning, we scoped a clear but flexible roadmap to take us from idea to practice. So in Q2 last year, we focused on setting up for success. So that was aligning with leadership, getting that strategy alignment in place, creating a wiki, identifying initial champion candidates, and making sure the idea landed well. In Q3, we launched a structured pilot. We felt that a pilot would best embrace wabi-sabi and allow us to remain light and flexible in our approach, and also give us an excuse if it didn't quite work properly, but it worked quite well. We recruited our first 10 champions on our way to 6,000 maybe one day. We onboarded them, kicked off Slack collaboration channels, started supporting early threat modeling efforts. And in Q4, we prioritized feedback, what was working, what wasn't. We clarified roles, and we learned from the teams on the ground actually involved in the Champions program. And so now we're in the embed and expand phase. So we're scaling to new teams, we're adjusting based on feedback, and maturing how champions interact with cyber. So the roadmap gave us structure, but left space for iteration, which was absolutely key to the program's success. So with that, I'll hand over to Paul, one of my colleagues, who will walk you through how the pilot played out in real life. Clicker.
Great, thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Paul Johnson and I'm a security advisor at Sportsbet. Nice to meet you all. Cool, so we knew what we wanted to do. We needed that path to success. So we created 6 steps to launch that pilot and be successful in the delivery of our Champions program. So what were those 6 steps? Number 1, taking the plan, taking that strategy and formalizing something that would work for Sportsbet. Next was recruiting, turning those informal allies into trusted partners. Then clearing a path with their leaders to ensure that they were supportive of the cause. Then it was up to launching, gathering all those champions together and kicking off. Followed by an education campaign to establish baseline knowledge across the cohort of champions. And then finally, reflect, learn, and improve, taking that wabi-sabi approach, understanding if we did a good job, and changing and tweaking as we went. So, how did we get it off the ground? What was our plan? How would we be successful in the eyes of the champion and also their leaders? Well, we took it back. We went, what is it we want them to do at its core? And that was, as mentioned earlier, threat modeling, stride framework. We wanted them to collaborate and learn from each other as a collective group. We wanted them to innovate, and we wanted them to be available and dedicate the time to the program, not just do something off the side of their desk. So we asked, if I was a champion, what is it that would keep me engaged and committed to the program? So we determined that we needed to identify those business areas and those teams that were doing security well. That's where our champions would be for our pilot. Those teams are those teams that they have a low security vulnerability count. They're doing security well, and they're really thinking outside the box and influencing the rest of the business. So we would target those areas. Next, we determined the number of champions, and Jean mentioned this earlier. How many would be the ideal ratio for Sportsbet so that within the respective pillars, there would be an available champion for every developer and engineer. So someone that they could engage. And what would that look like for Sportsbet? Next was creating those communication channels that Jean had mentioned earlier. And that was Slack. We decided we would need 3 channels, two champions channels, one for the program as a whole, so anyone in Sportsbet could understand more about the program. One for the facilitators to coordinate the standing up of the program. And the most important one is that communication channel for our champions, which was completely locked down and isolated from the rest of the business, so that they had a safe space to collaborate and learn from each other where the outside noise couldn't get in. Next was setting up a security champions hub. And so Jean spoke about wabi-sabi, and we'll talk about this more later, but effectively this was going to be our wiki, a place where any of our champions could go to get the resources and the learning material that they needed to be successful in the role, and also where anyone from Sportsbet could go and understand more about the program. So this is step 2, recruitment. We had the plan on a page, and we needed to formalize that relationship with those informal allies. It was kind of like an awkward proposal. How were we going to get them on board? What was it that we could pitch to them to make them say yes to us? We wanted them to work with us and create that formal partnership. So we took it back to that question. What is an ideal candidate? What is a good champion? What do they look like? So those people are security-focused engineers with existing security knowledge. They're somewhat senior. They're influencers within their respective teams. They're respected. They have confidence, and they are not afraid to challenge the status quo. They're risk aware. They have that idea to be able to perform threat modeling somewhat naturally. So we would use those qualities to fill in any remaining gaps based on those ratios and what we talked about, getting enough champions within those respective pillars within the org. So how do you get them on board? Number one, you start with the pitch. What is it that they would get out of the program? Well, boosting their reputation, obtaining formal recognition across their peers and team members and leaders, and help them create a security-focused career path. That was the selling point. Then we also worked out the number of champions for the pilot and the hourly commitment, being 10 candidates, 2 hours per week. Enough that the security team at Sportsbet had enough time to be able to dedicate to those champions and get them on board. So then we're up to clear a path. We talked about our champions, we've got those informal allies, we've had those chats as a security team, but what about clearing the path with those champions leaders? We had the strategy at Sportsbet, top-down approach, we're going to do the security champions program, but that does not necessarily mean that their direct manager or leader was supportive of the program. You can understand that there's those competing business priorities at any given time across the business, and their opinion may differ. Maybe the champions program isn't important. So how did we go about it? Well, we went to our champions and we said, guys, can you have that communication, that chat with your leaders as the first step? Highlight the importance of the program and the benefits to the team. Highlight the fact that you will identify risk earlier using threat modeling, and you'll save time, cost, money by shifting left or starting left and identifying those threats within your application stacks earlier, creating a secure product without security having to block at the last minute. Where managers weren't so supportive, the security team in parallel had those conversations to highlight the importance of the program and embrace that wabi-sabi or that imperfection of our pilot. So an interesting finding here was we had some of our managers come back and say, we don't want Joe. Joe's no good, he's no good as a security champion, but we do have this person, Wendy, who's a lot better fit based upon those key qualities that we were after. And that was okay, we pivoted, we weren't sure, and we took that as their recommendation and we moved on with the program. The next thing was to understand that you need that commitment in writing. You want your security champions to have the confidence to be able to participate in the program. So ensure that their leaders were providing in writing that, yep, we fully endorse the program and Joe or Wendy can dedicate their time to it. Very important so that the champion feels like they're supported in the role. So we had the foundation that we needed to kick off and recruits with high potential. How are we going to establish that common security language across the cohort of champions? So we applied a time-boxed onboarding program. The program is aimed at achieving the baseline level of knowledge with the goal of getting from a junior level to a mentor level over time. And we tied this back to exactly what we wanted our champions to do and the goals of our program at Sportsbet in obtaining that knowledge. So we forecasted that it would take 8 weeks for a recruit to get from foundational knowledge, to get from the starting point to the foundational knowledge to understand our common language on how to do those key activities that we wanted. It would take from 6 to 12 months to get to that intermediate level where the champion was actively engaging with us and providing real value back to the security team, helping to cut down that security assessment time and providing that valuable, tangible input back to us. And then finally, 12 months to become an influencer and a mentor to other champions coming through the business, or coming through the program rather. So those were the people that were going to become those key security partners within those developer and engineering teams. Those ones that would highlight risks early, they would work hand in hand with the security team when something wasn't quite right, and they were able to innovate with the security team, find better ways of doing things and come back to us and sort of say, guys, there's a better way of doing this. Let's look at this tool, something new, things like that. So if you remember the wiki or the learning hub that we talked about earlier, this was a part of that eight-week onboarding program. It was that educate piece. How were we going to establish that common language? So what we did is we put ourselves in the shoes of the champion. We asked ourselves, okay, if I've joined this program as a security champion, what is it that I would want to know and what would I want to be available to me? They needed to be able to do the job. So our curriculum focused on thinking about a couple of things. Number one, what level are our champions at? They're all at different levels. What do we want them to do? What is important? And how much time did they have available to them, that 2 hours, based upon 8 weeks, and what would actually fit in? Remembering that these aren't security people, these are just engineers and developers who have a strong interest in security, but really may not have a deep level of understanding on any given topic. So our onboarding covered the basics. It was key things within the wiki itself. Roles and responsibilities, or a RACI or a RACI, some people call it. But what is it exactly that our champions are responsible for within Sportsbet? And what is it that we don't want them to do? Clear outlines of what they will do and how they will work with the security team. Next is FAQs. So leaders, anyone in the business understanding more about the program, and for our champions, those common questions, having that within our wiki. Then it was templates. So having those things that the champion could go to that site, pick it up off the shelf, take the template, perform the threat modeling, and know exactly how to submit that into the security team in a common way so that it was consistent for our team as we received those. Then courses. So we came up with a bit of a wiki or a course guide on that threat modeling, those other topics that I'll cover shortly, on what we want them to do. And we used things like AWS Skill Builder and selected those key baseline learning modules that they should complete. And then finally was recordings. For every session that the security team ran within Sportsbet with our champions, we would record that and we would add that to our wiki or our catalogue so that anyone knew, or if they wanted to revisit that content, they could do so. And then we got into the deep content. So these were the key things that aligned to our program goals and what we wanted to get out. So number one was threat modeling based upon Stride, running workshops with the teams around that particular concept so that the teams could produce that secure code, so that we established that common language and they could identify threats in a common way. Next was secure software development lifecycle. So we wanted them to become experts in application security vulnerabilities, understand our application security tooling, and help communicate that back into their respective teams in a consistent way and be those people that could identify amongst all the vulnerabilities what's important and what is not, basically filtering the noise. And then finally, it was secure patterns or patterns in general. We wanted them to understand how to produce those so that we had repeatable ways of delivering application stacks across Sportsbet and to sort of prevent the different ways of doing things and help the security team cut down the assessment time. So now our internal champions wiki was established and it allowed that decentralized learning model to occur to hopefully create effective champions with impact. So now onto the early wins. We'd kicked off our pilot. We were nearing the end of the pilot. We thought, what were those early wins? Were we seeing anything coming out of this? Well, we saw a high level of engagement. Our champions were interested in the program, suggesting that the effort spent by the security team had paid off. We observed a culture shift amongst our champions. They were collaborating with each other within that Slack channel. They were sharing ideas and security patterns. Threat models were being produced without the security team asking. Now that they understood the concept, it was just starting to happen. And furthermore, they were understanding how the security team worked. They understood how to engage with us. And with that, innovation flowed. A good example here was we had one of our champions, they work within a developer agility platform. And based upon now understanding threat modeling, they were able to go and create a custom plugin that enabled threat modeling within that platform, which was a fantastic outcome. We had gained the respect of our champions, by listening and collaborating with them, and we had won their trust, leading them to advocate for the program amongst their peers and their leaders. But now on to reflect, learn, and improve. This is a cycle or a value of Sportsbet. We asked, had we achieved our goals? Did we take the right approach? Was the baseline knowledge there amongst our champions? Were we seeing those outcomes that we had hoped that we would see? And it is it's hard to answer those questions, actually, when you think about it, especially when you do the wabi-sabi approach. But you ask yourself, how are you going to gather this information? And leaning upon the Guardians program and their experience, it's basically pretty simple. Champion surveys and manager surveys, that's the easiest way to do this thing. We measured engagement of our champions based on net promoter scoring, the participation in each individual topic, those deep learning topics that we wanted, were they participating? We measured their knowledge. Did they feel like they learned more, starting with threat modeling or application vulnerability, like security vulnerabilities? Had it advanced since we started? What was the quality of the material that we had produced as a security team? Did it live up to their expectations, and did the security team live up to their expectations in the way that we communicated with them? And was the scheduling right? Was that 2 hours enough, or was it too little? Were they given the runway that they needed? Next is manager surveys, and that was as simple as, is our champion participating within the team? Are they advocating for the program and sharing knowledge with their peers? Are they identifying risks within their respective stacks or respective projects that are occurring? And is the general feel good about the program, or are they thinking this is a bit of a waste of time? Now, here's some 2 direct quotes from our surveys that we conducted. Yin and yang, they're opposite. The takeaway here is that you will get very differing opinions, and that is completely based upon the level of engagement of the champion. That's what we found. We found that if there is a lower level of engagement or a negative comment, that basically came down to 2 things. Number 1, the champion was forced into the program. Their leader, for whatever reason, said, Joe is good or Wendy is good for the program, but you should go do this. But they weren't really that interested, so the engagement wasn't that high, which is fine. The other one is they weren't given the time, even though the time was committed. So, projects obviously take priority, and that's completely fine as well. But not giving the runway they deserve, so they couldn't lean in to the education, that onboarding, that 8-week cycle, and so they didn't get enough out of it, which is a little bit sad, but there's still wins there, because at the end of the day, those topics that they did participate in, they still got something out of it, and so would the security team. So the learning there is to provide the space and ensure that everyone understands the commitment that they're making. So measuring program success and value. We needed to know, have we achieved our return on investment? That's something that everyone across the company will ask. And it's like, is this thing worth it? Are we getting what we want out of it? And as you know, we did the wabi-sabi, and we went for it. And personally myself, I did not put enough effort into those baseline metrics and establishing that up front, which bit me a little bit, but we'll get into that. So you need to establish your baseline metrics up front so that you can track the success. Those quantitative metrics. So what were ours? What are the key ones that we track today? Number 1, time to perform security review. So those threat models, that effort reduction, how is that translating back to the security review duration? And I see myself personally, at least 2 hours is saved on those, just up front, having that threat model available. We never used to have that, which is great. The number of threat models being produced. So for every project with a champion, you may not expect a threat model to be produced for whatever reason, depth, so on and so forth. But the percentage of those over time, and is that improving? Next, secure patterns. Are those secure patterns being produced or updated? So has that conversation and that positive security messaging filtered throughout the developer teams and those pillars? And are our patterns being produced? Which we did see via an authentication pattern. One of our engineers found something, said we can do auth better in this way. And so we went with it and ran it. ran with it and updated the pattern. Identified risks. How many risks, formalized risks, have come through from a champion and them doing threat modeling before it gets to the security team? So we saw one here which was really good, and it was an engineer performed threat modeling on a system, hadn't gone live yet, but what we found was there was a third-party tool scraping data on our front end that we didn't expect. It wasn't within any of the initial designs, but they had found it via threat modeling, and it saved us launching a product and having a third-party scrape data that we didn't expect and we didn't want to be scraped. So that was able to be remediated before we went to production. It was a great outcome. Next is community strength. So via those surveys that I talked about, just measuring how strong our community is going. The number of education sessions, keeping ourselves honest as a security team, so that we're ensuring that we're continually educating and providing back to our community based upon security knowledge and covering different topics and so forth. And then our retention rate, which is, are they dropping off over time? Normal attrition is fine, but are we seeing this sort of decline or improve? Now, it's not just about those quantitative metrics. What about qualitative? Those things that you can't really measure, that feeling. Now, some people in a business might say, oh, it's all about the hard metrics, we need numbers. I disagree. I think for a security champions program, about 50% of it is that feel as a security team. Like, does it feel better? I think you would know what I'm talking about just when you work with different teams around the business. But the questions we asked sort of to get that feeling was, has the quality of engagements improved? Is it now, instead of just, I want a security review, is all that stuff coming through, that additional detail that we didn't get before to stop us having to ask those basic questions, is that coming through? Are they providing those artifacts that we want, the threat models, the design documents, HLDs, all of that? Is that actually starting to come through without having to ask? Are security questions being surfaced more often? So as a security team, do they feel comfortable asking instead of just waiting to the last minute and avoiding us? Next was, are people collaborating better? So within that champions community, are they all talking to each other? Has it created, I guess, that safe space where they're actively engaging, discussing common problems? And then does the dev team's relationship or does the security team's relationship feel better with those engineers and developers? And for us, this was a massive win. We felt that we had a lot more insight into how they worked and they understood us, which was great. So if these feelings, if positive, if they are positive, they directly align to program maturity. But you're sitting there thinking, okay, security, amazing, Sportsbet, we had a perfect program, 10 people. No, that's not the case. Wabi-sabi bit us a little bit in relation to those metrics, but here were the challenges that we looked out for or that we experienced, and hopefully you can take our lessons learned here. So setting clear expectations. Avoiding false advertisement. So you don't want your champions joining the program and it's not something they expected, but because they will become detractors. They're just going to naturally opt out and they may not talk about the program favourably. And then the other one is they may take without contributing back. So a one-way street, not a two-way street. Oh, this is great, I want to do security, give me all the content, educate me, and then they say, see you later. Avoid that, set expectations up front. Next is protecting your security champions, and I like to say reducing the abuse, because it happens. So some people within the org thought security champions are just security minions that just go away and do security stuff like just patch and do vulnerabilities, and they basically abuse their role. We had a project manager join our security champions channel, the private one. I don't know how they got in there, but they did. And the first thing they did is said, here's a list of, don't quote me on the number, but 1,000 hard-coded secrets amongst 20 different code repos. Champions go in, work out what repo you're responsible for, and you need to go and remediate all of your hard-coded secrets. And honestly, that was not what the champions program was about. They should have been the ones communicating back to the team, guys, how can we facilitate reducing hard-coded secrets and creating that positive messaging and then finding potentially someone that could remediate that. So that guy got booted out of the channel pretty quick and we had to reset that baseline expectation. The learning here is technology-wide communication about the do's and don'ts of your champion so that there isn't this false messaging around minions. They're not minions, they're people, and they've got a job to do, but a very defined one. Complicated curriculum. Gene mentioned earlier a simple wiki. I didn't do that. I created one that was way too big, and the champions got confused. Stick to very simple things on what you want them to do. Threat modeling, application security. Stick with what matters most. Next, management layer pushback. You need to define your sales pitch. Where those leaders say, I don't want my champion, there was no one in my team that needs to be involved in this program, it's not for us. It is for them, but maybe they're not ready yet. Use the other side of the program where those other teams have lent into it to define your sales pitch and use that as evidence to get them on board 6 months later. Next, competing priorities. So Melbourne Cup, the race that stops a nation. Don't launch during peak time. That's what we did, and that sort of bit us a little bit. So think about the time within your business where it's very quiet, you're going to get buy-in. Time zones, we're a global organisation. We have Cluj, Romania. Security team's not that big. We don't have that many people. We found that we had the 12-hour time gap, and it was very taxing for us to do the security champions on the other side of the world, as in run those training sessions. So think about that when you're doing your training. Does it scale? Do you need to do recordings? Things like that. And then the what's next. So continue the momentum. We finished the program, and some of our champions were saying, well, now what? I've been educated, I don't know what to do. So just think about how you will continue that momentum and not take your foot off the gas. So what are we doing as a security champions program now at Sportsbet? Right, we've gone through our pilot. We've got 40 champions now from 10, instead of 10, we're up to like 42, which is good. Not 6,000, but you know. We're recruiting with intent. So those key qualities that you want with your champions, we've learned from our mistakes, those people that don't really gel with the program. We're very sure about who we want and who we don't want. Sorry, let me go back. We're widening the footprint. Those teams that were detractors or not ready yet, we're leaning into that. We're deepening our capability, so we're expanding upon that threat modeling and that application security vulnerability stuff. We're deepening what we're getting out of our champions. And then we're refining how our champions operate with us through process improvements and engaging the security team. And then finally, we've improved our metrics drastically. So now we hope that our champions program will scale, or can continue to scale and be successful, but we will continually re-baseline and re-measure and pivot as required. But that is our champions program, and hopefully you got something out of it today that you can take back to go, okay, these are the mistakes, and kick off successfully. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Thanks, there.
No worries.
Wow. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Gene. That's, working with you as your customer and the store and what you've done with your champions program, I think it's amazing. Awesome. Kristen, we haven't heard from you for a little while. You first met Sportsbet through 2024. What you've heard them talk about today as well. What's impressed you the most based on your experience with what Sportsbet have built on their champions program?
Yeah, there's two things that really stood out to me. One is the formality of the onboarding. So at AWS, when we first did this program in typical AWS culture, we kind of just threw people into the deep end and said, good luck, go figure it out, which works sometimes, but it doesn't really create this like collaborative community that I think y'all did a really good job of. And so I think formalizing that onboarding and having that kind of like path to foundational knowledge to like intermediate advisor to mentor, influencer, I forgot exactly what they were. Like, I think that's really important because it gives that person the ability to like set milestones in their head of what they should achieve and how they can then contribute back to the program. The other thing that stood out to me that actually gave me an idea of something I want to take back to AWS after this is when you're trying to measure the impact of the work they're doing, it's really hard, quite frankly, because you have to have a way to collect that data and report on that data and be consistent. But one of the things you called out was those guardians or champions identifying risk earlier on. We always measured like what was the outcome, like were less findings identified before launch by our security team. But like really what you want them to do is be identifying risk earlier on. In a presentation I'm actually doing later, we talk about how we like recognize and reward engineers for identifying things. And I think measuring that is a really good idea because it's also an opportunity for them to be recognized for doing something. And it's also a good way to celebrate people finding bad things. We do that a lot at AWS, and I think it's really core to the culture and important for people to take back. So I thought that was awesome.
Oh, that's amazing. Jane and Paul, when you were talking, you talked quite a bit about leadership. I'm curious to know, how did you interact with your leadership, and how did you make them see the benefit of the Security Guardians program or Champions program? And I suppose more importantly, how did you get them to fund it? You know?
Sure. I might take this one, Barry. Yep. So we are serious at we're serious about security as Sportsbet. Number one, I think we do it very well. You know, security is everyone's responsibility. It's a bit of a lame statement, but it is. We identified that the security team was a bottleneck. So having that bottleneck, it wasn't going to scale. Like we started off as a very small organization, and over time the security team has grown, but so has the number of products that we have to deliver. And our leaders really identified that we don't want to get to the position where the security team is always sitting there going, you're the bottleneck, it's the security team, it's the security team. They could see the benefit of spreading out that security knowledge in a formalized way, having those champions in each pillar so that we could get ahead of those, I guess those security questions, and then that level of comfort and informality was established to help, I guess, the whole thing gel as an overall developer pipeline. So that was the main thing that we saw from, I guess, the benefit that the leaders saw from that perspective. But Gene, on the funding thing, yeah.
Yeah, on the funding, that's a great question. Our funding was donuts. We had no money at all to spend on this from a capital expenditure perspective. But we didn't really need it, so we could kick off and get this all going with no money. We figured that money would come in handy later when we wanted to buy some t-shirts or merch for our champions, maybe a badge or two. I've got a few of them today. So we see that as an added bonus, added incentive, a bit of a reward. Maybe pay for some training for champions in future is something we'll look to do. But we really wanted to demonstrate some value first from the program before we launched into we need a hell of a lot of money. And I think just to add to that justification to senior leadership, what was most influential from me was ensuring alignment to our tech strategy. Like that was really an much easier sell to senior leaders. If you've got that technology strategy already in place and you can pin this program to that, we had asynchronous ways of working to help us work with our friends in Cluj in a different time zone on the other side of the planet, and engineering excellence. And this speaks to engineering excellence, really. We have more of champions out there. We have more excellent engineering. So that was probably number one for me.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for that. $0 music to all leadership's ears, I can imagine. So yeah, great to see. Paul, you talked a bit about training in during your session. To help people here understand, I'm curious to understand what's the minimum level of training you would advise the people listening here today to skill up your champions or your Guardians?
I talked about the wiki boiling the ocean. I created way too much content. Have associated playbooks. So the champions came back to me and they said, I don't know, you've got this list of 10 things that I need to do and I don't understand where to start. Cool. Take it back to basics, small rocks. What is it you want them to do, and create a playbook that directly aligns to that tells them exactly how to do it. That is where you'll see the most value, and that's where I would start.
Yeah, that's great advice. Kristen, we both work for AWS. We love customers learning from AWS. But I'm curious, during this program, in your experience setting up the AWS Guardians program for AWS, is there anything you've learned from your experience working with Sportsbet that we can learn in reverse, take into AWS?
Yeah, I think what resonated with me is the fact that y'all started small and specific. And I've worked with a number of different customers who have taken a similar approach, but also have taken the opposite approach, which is I generally want them to know about security and talk about security. And Both have successes, but I think the biggest, the programs that have continued to grow and perpetuate and add value are the ones that are super specific. Identify what is that one specific activity you want them to do. You all focused on threat modeling. Have a way for them to get feedback, like consistent corrective feedback to help improve their threat models. And then have a way to recognize them and the impact that they're having on that one specific activity. And then over time, there will be creep. People will say, well, can I leverage them for this? Can I leverage them for that? Be very specific about what you want them to be leveraged for, and just don't let it, become more than a single person could handle, because otherwise it's just too overwhelming. But if you can do that and remain specific and small in scope while giving them a community to talk about that thing and learn from each other, and not just one that's on Slack, bring them together to communicate with each other. They're humans, they are seeking engagement with other people. I think if you can do those two things, I think that's where you can be most successful.
Yeah, very important. So you both have gone through the process of setting up a Guardians and a Champions program. So for everybody listening here today, I'm curious to understand, what are the key takeaways? If you were to tell people listening today, look out for these 2 things or 3 things, what would they be from your experience? Paul or John?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think being really clear about what you want your champions to do is probably number 1. Where will they add the most value, essentially? And for us, we identified pretty early on that this was threat modeling, as already mentioned. But having decided on that, we also needed to understand that maybe our threat modeling technique wasn't really up to scratch within cybersecurity in the first place. So how could we teach our champions how to do threat modeling properly if we probably didn't really have the most up-to-date or up-to-scratch threat modeling process within cyber? So ensuring you've got that built in, ready to go, and being really clear about that's what you want your champions to do. So it'd be the most important takeaway.
Yeah, nice. Paul? You good?
That reduce abuse, just ensure that your roles and responsibilities are very clearly defined. If you get that right and that's well communicated across the org, you won't have any issues, and the champions will know where they fit in exactly. That's where the value sits.
Yeah, nice. Make them feel safe.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Kristen?
I think I use this analogy a lot in the program. Think of, if you're building this, think of it like you're building a neighborhood association. Everyone in that neighborhood has their own house that they need to protect and keep safe. And that's how it needs to be if you're going to build this program. It can't be optional that they are going to go and protect their house or not. That needs to be the expectation at your company. Otherwise, I don't think it works. So if you're wondering where to start, I think ask yourself, is my company ready? And if it's not, you might want to consider starting with these conversations with different leaders to say, who is ultimately responsible and accountable if the applications that leader owns, has security issues. And if the answer is the security team, I don't think that a Guardians, quite frankly, program is where you need to start. I think you need to start with, making it clear where ownership of security sits. And when that ownership is really well understood within the company, each of those teams has to figure out how are they going to protect their house, and they're going to seek out a community of people that they can learn from to protect it better and more efficiently. And that's when I think you can really thrive.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, earlier on this morning we were actually talking about ownership in this whole security space. So yeah, that's all time we got for today. We will hang around if anybody else has some more questions outside of what we've talked about here in the last 10-15 minutes. On the left-hand side there is a QR code to the blog, the first blog that Sportsbet read that tweaked their interest, that kickstarted this whole process and has ended up here today. But we want to thank you for your time today and listening to us. Hopefully you got value. If you want to connect to us on LinkedIn, there's our LinkedIn profiles. Happy to talk more about a Security Guardians or a Champions program. Again, thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And
enjoy your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.